being that I'm a bit younger than most of you, my talk is going to mostly focus on my current education and how from before my education to afterwards has impacted my view on the environment. So as Dodie mentioned, I've been skiing and living up in the mountain environment here for a long time. As I grew up, that immersion in the environment really started to increase. I spent a lot of time camping, fishing, doing things outdoors with my family, and that drastically increased as I became a student athlete in Caribbean Valley. Spending almost every day out on the mountain, really immersed in the outdoor world, and also understanding that the environment, the nature, the mountain was really the means for the enjoyment of our sport in general. However, in my time at CVA and before I went to St. Lawrence, I really had no formal education about the environment. So as I began in the Intro to Environmental Studies class, it was kind of the beginning of learning about how complex the environment is in general, not necessarily even focused on climate change. Moving forward from that course, the next course that I took was a little more involved, and it was called Annotating Environment. And this class focused specifically on comparing and contrasting the pros and cons of renewable energy systems as well as fossil fuel-based energy systems. I learned a lot of interesting information in this class, things that I didn't expect, like the fact that hydroelectric power has a wide range of impacts that aren't specifically focused on the environment, that also incorporate some social injustice as well, in terms of transboundary water issues and water rights. We all know that water flows in a direction, and if you are upstream and you have the rights to the water, you can do whatever you please with that water. One of the major issues that came out of this class, which I looked at, was the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and the damming of those rivers, and that a large majority of the river itself is actually in Turkey, and a small portion is in Syria, and the damming of the rivers takes a lot of water flow away from the Syrian people, but there's no political platform for any kind of agreement between the two countries. So this was kind of my first in-depth perspective in regards to the environment. We also got the opportunity in this class to look at our current economic system and think about how we evaluate human prosperity and human welfare based on GDP, and the hope that we could somehow get to a point where we change that so that it's not specifically focused on production, on material wealth. So moving forward from this course, I took a wide range of environmental classes. I was really interested. I took classes focused on adaptation. I took classes focused on climate mitigation, environmental epidemiology, and so forth. And then, as a junior at St. Lawrence, I had the opportunity to go abroad. And I decided to do my studies abroad in Denmark. Denmark being a very interesting case study because it's one of the environmental leaders throughout the world. Denmark produces and exports more renewable energy resources than any other country in the world to everywhere else in the world. So this was naturally something that drew my attention, and one of the more applicable classes that I took there was called Integrated Climate Change Planning. And that was focused on how to build resilience to climate events in a city. And the major takeaway that came from this was that the most effective solutions are naturally based in terms of reintroducing a natural space into the cityscape, showing that the city is not it's an impermeable surface, and dealing with rainwater events and such, the green spaces that were placed in the city offered a lot more opportunity for the rainwater to percolate back into the environment. Furthermore, if you flood a natural space versus flooding a space where a city must function, it's not inhibiting the function of the city. So, in thinking about this theoretically, I was kind of given the perspective that we're building a city, yet at the point where it's fully developed, we're going back to seek nature as our protection from nature itself, which is really interesting to think about. So my experience in Denmark incorporated a lot of other portions of environmentalism, but that's kind of the one I wanted to focus on. And coming back from a city environment, having grown up here, I was looking for something a little closer to home. I was given the opportunity to be in a research course that was focused specifically on climate change impacts of winter sports. And in this research, we focused specifically on winter sports athletes, the amount of practice time that they must acquire to become an expert in their sport, and what the climate models regarding skier days in the future, snow potential, and inconsistencies of winter weather mean. And in this research, using those climate models, we find that the potential to achieve the amount of practice time that you need to become an expert in your sport is incredibly diminished, and that winter sports athletes need to find alternative ways to acquire the amount of practice to actually be proficient and successful. And I brought 2 or 3 copies of the research report. If anyone's interested in looking at the full report afterwards, you're more than welcome to. So moving forward from this research class, brought all the information with me because skiing is something that I really cared about. It's something that built kind of the foundation of my character as an athlete at CVA, but also growing up before that and moving into the future afterwards as a recreational skier. So, going through my experience as a student, given me a lot of information, but not a lot of technical solutions. Being someone who's in that education environment, people expect you to kind of decide what you might want to do with your education when you leave. And most of the way through my educational career, I was still kind of lost as to where to go with this. So this brings me to the present semester that I'm currently studying in as a senior at St. Lawrence. The main focus of my study being particularly in the energy field. And I'm currently enrolled in a class called Energy and Life Cycle Analysis. This class offers us an opportunity to look at materials and energy as inputs to produce some product. If you use, let's say, a water bottle, for example, you can look at the elements that went into that water bottle directly from the environment, and also the emissions to the environment or pollution to the environment through air, water, or soil, as well as the energy demand that you need to actually produce this. More importantly, aside from water bottles, this gives us the opportunity to examine some energy systems side by side. If you look at the production of energy from one unit of energy production from a solar panel, you can compare that directly to 1 unit of energy production of something from a coal-fired power plant. And in that analysis, you can take the time to look at how much global warming potential each of the processes produce, or the amount of total energy that each process produces. And you can compare those. And the reason that I think this is so important is because we must remember that for material and energy use, our world is finite. We have one globe that we live on, and we have only the resources that it provides to us. So in terms of this, it gives us the opportunity to actually manage our resources well. We can see where everything is going. So that is kind of my focus of my education, and it's really made me look at the outdoor world a lot more critically and think about how we use the space that exists for us today.